Shabbat Shalom, everyone. We welcome everybody who's here in our sanctuary, everybody who's joining us from home. Our junior congregation this evening, so some of our young ones are with us, even though we're in the midst of our spring break. We will begin our service on page 2, as we'll invite the Olenek family up to light our candles. They just sat down and we're already making them stand up again. So we'll invite you up and invite you to lead us in our candle blessings. Everybody can join us on page 2 and 3 for the blessings over our Shabbat candles.
Before I light? Yeah. Okay. You want to read the English? No, okay. O source of light and truth, creator of the eternal law of goodness, help us to find knowledge by which to live. Lead us to take the words we shall speak into our hearts and our lives. Bless all who enter the sanctuary in need, all who bring the offerings of their hearts. May our worship lead us to acts of kindness, peace, and love. Better than Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat.
Amen. Thank you. Nope.
Later.
That goes to down later.
Right.
To be continued. Continue page 13. We begin our Shabbat worship and song. May we find joy in this moment as we've been commanded to make this not only a day of rest, but for whatever our week has been, for the losses we faced, for the challenges we faced, for any of the troubles we've looked out into the world and seen, we take this moment to sing a new song to bring joy into our Shabbat, into our sanctuary, our community, and our world. Page 13, Shiru Ladonai. We think back through our week to the places we've been, the people we've seen, to the challenges we've faced, all the things we've overcome, and we highlight the blessings that we've had. And so collectively, we bring those blessings into this space, welcoming Shabbat. Words of Lechadodi, page 20. Please join together as we get to verse 9 of Lechadodi, we'll face our door, welcoming Shabbat physically in. But first, we welcome in those blessings that we've had with these words, page 20.
Lechadodi likrat kala penei Shabbat nekavela. Lechadodi likrat kala penei לשם ולתפארת ולתחילה. לך דודי לקראת קהלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת קהלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לקראת שבת לכו ונלכה, כי מקור הברכה מראש מקדם נסוכה.
סוף מעשה במחשבה תחילה.
לך דודי לקראת קהלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת קהלה, פני שבת נקבלה. התעוררי, התעוררי, כי באורך קומי אורי, 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 שיר דברי, כבוד אדוני עלייך נגלה. לך דודי לקראת קהלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת קהלה, פני שבת נקבלה. Please rise and face the entrance to our sanctuary or to your home. בואי ושלום, עטרת בעלה גם בשמחה ובשכלה, תוך אמוני העם סגולה. בואי חלה, בואי חלה. לך דודי לקראת קהלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת קהלה, פני שבת נקבלה. Please join me on the next page for Chatzi Kaddish. יתגדל ויקדש שמי רבה, בעלמא יפרח חירותי וימליך מלכותי. בחייכון וביומכון ובחייך בית ישראל. בגלה, בגלה ובזמן קריב ויאמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מברך לעלם ולעלמיה. יתברך, יתברך וישתבח, ויתפאר ויתרומם וינשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה, ויתהלל שמי דקדש בריחו. לעילם ינקום בחטא ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, דמירון בעלמא, ויאמרו אמן.
Baruch Hu, page 28.
La 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la, ya la 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 la. Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach, HaMevorach le'olam לעולם ועד.
Page 30 and 31, our blessing for moments of change. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bidvaro ma'ariv aravim. Praised are you, Adonai, our God, from whom this evening flows. Your wisdom sets the way on which time and season glide, and your breath guides the sail of the stars. Creator of the tide of time and light, guide the current of day into night. As heaven spans to infinity, you set its course for eternity. Baruch atah Adonai ha'ma'ariv aravim. Praised are you, God, from whom this evening flows as we mark this moment of change from day to night. Our prayer for the love of our people, page 32, Ahavato love.
אהבת עולם בית ישראל עמך אהבת עמך אהבת תורה ומצוות חוקים ומשפטים אותנו לימדת אותנו לימדת על כן אדוני אלוהינו ושכבנו פגומנו נשיח בחוקיך ונשמח בדברי תורתך ומצוותך לעולם ועד. אהבת עולם בית ישראל עמך אהבת עמך אהבת.
Shema, page 34 and 35.
Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Adonai Echad Baruch Shem Kevod Shem Kevod Malachuto Leolam Leolam Ba'ed. Please be seated. And thou shalt love Adonai thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, and with all thy might. All these words which I command you on this day shall be in thy heart, shall be in thy heart. And thou shalt teach them diligently unto thy children. Thou shalt speak of them when thou sittest in thy house, when thou walkest by the way, and when thou liest down, and when thou risest up, and when thou risest up. And thou shalt bind them for a sign upon thy hand, and they shall be for frontlets between thine eyes. And thou shalt write them on the doorpost of thy house, and upon thy gates, and upon thy gates, that ye may remember and do all of my commandments
few moments, we'll invite the youngest among us to join Lauren. So Lauren, just raise your hand so everybody can see. All the kids are going to go with Lauren in a few minutes. First, they have a fun activity planned, so you'll have some Shabbat fun together, and then join us back for the end of the service. As we get to the words on page 40, followed by the words on page 42, the words of Mi Chamocha and Hashkivenu, how can we not be reminded that we're about to enter into our spring season and Passover being next week, 1 week from tonight. Many of us will sit around our Seder tables and tell a great story of our people and all the crazy ways in which we tell that story with our kids and singing songs and speaking of freedom and blessing each other and looking towards the future with the optimism of Elijah coming through the door. And so we share these two prayers. First, the words of Mi Chamocha from the book of Exodus, that our people in history, in the present, and in the future have celebrated moments in which we have moved from being enslaved to moments of freedom. And more personally, we've taken moments, as we do in Hashkivenu, to say a blessing over those we love and to mark moments of peace as we enter into the evening. For whatever scares us, we remind those we love that we look forward to the next day. And so we begin page 40 with the words of Mi Chamocha, then the words of Hashkivenu, page 42.
Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi chamocha neidar b'kodesh. Nora tehilot osei vele, Nora tehilot osei vele. Malachutecha ra'u vanecha b'kei hayam Lifnei Moshe u'Miriam Zelianu le'ameru Adonai imloch Adonai imloch le'olam ba'id. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom, l'shalom. V'ha'amidenu shomreinu l'chayim. Ufros aleinu sukat shalomecha, ufros aleinu sukat shalomecha. Shelter us beneath thy wings, O Adonai. Guard us from all harmful things, O Adonai. Keep us safe throughout the night, till we wake with morning's light. Teach us, God, wrong from right, O Adonai. Amen. 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 O Adonai.
We invite our students to follow Miss Lauren right out the sanctuary doors. So if you want to go with her, I think you have some, they're going to make use of all the leavening we have and have a lot of bread tonight as we get ready to not have bread next week. So there's going to be some fun bread creations that our kids are going to make. We turn to page 44 and 45, the words of Vishamru, more than the Jewish people. It says there at the bottom of page 45, this famous comment from Ahad Ha'am. More than the Jewish people has kept Shabbat, Shabbat has kept the Jewish people. It's a statement that because we have moments of peace together, because we use time together and mark our calendars together, that we stay together. we're also reminded that because we experience pain together, as we have over these last 3 weeks now, in which terror attacks have happened in Israel, as we notice more than the rest of the world that people have lost their lives due to the violence that has been brought upon Israelis, so too we remind ourselves we're together in those tragic moments as well. And so we transition from what has been yet another week of loss in Israel to a moment in which we share together in Shabbat, V'shamru v'nei Yisrael, may all of the people of Israel find this moment to be one of blessing. Page 44.
V'shamru v'nei Yisrael et Hashabbat, la'asot et Hashabbat ledorotam Maritolam beni uvim b'nei Yisrael uti le'olam ki sheshet yamim Asaronai et Hashamayim v'et haaretz uvayom hashvi Shabbat
We rise, page 46. Our Amidah, our most personal prayers.
Adonai sifatai tiftach ufi yagi tehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu v'Elohei avoteinu v'imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, v'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, v'Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, V'konei hakol, V'zocher chaste avot v'imahot, Umevi geula livnei v'neihem, Lama'an shemo be'ahava, Melech ozer u'moshia u'magen, Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham v'Ezrat Sarah. Atah gibor le'olam Adonai, mechaye hakol atah rav lahoshia, mashiv haruach u'morid hagashem, mechalkel chayim bechesed, mechaye hakol berachamim rabim, ksomech noflim berofech olim, umatir asurim, Umekayim emunato lishenei afar micha mocha ba'al geburot umida melach melech meimitu mechaye umatmiak Yeshua V'ne'eman atah lahachayot hakol baruch atah Adonai mechaye hakol.
Please be seated. Page 55. May these hours of rest and renewal, we pray, open our hearts to joy and our minds to truth. May all who struggle find rest on this day. May all who suffer find solace. May all who hurt find healing on this day. May all who despair find purpose. May all who hunger find fulfillment on this day, and may this day fulfill its promise. Baruch atah Adonai, Mekadesh HaShabbat. Page 60, we turn our thoughts towards the greatest sense of peace we can imagine in our world and pray that that dream becomes a reality. Page 60, Shalom Rav.
Shalom Rav, Yisrael Amcha, Tasim Le'olam. Shalom Rav, Yisrael Amcha, Tasim Le'olam. Ki ata Malach Adon, L'chol HaShalom. Ki ata Malach Adon, L'chol HaShalom. Shalom Rav, Yisrael Amcha, Tasim Le'olam. Shalom Rav, Yisrael Amcha, Tasim Le'olam. V'tov be'enecha levarech et Amcha Yisrael. B'chol עת ובכל שעה בשלומך. Shalom Rav, Yisrael Amcha, Tasim Le'olam. Shalom Rav, Yisrael Amcha, Tasim Le'olam. Tasim Le'olam. Tasim Le'olam. Please take a few moments for a silent meditation. Usi shalom bimrama, hu yaseh shalom aleinu, v'yakol Yisrael, v'yimru amen. Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu, v'yakol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu, ve'al 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 Yisrael.
As many of us know, we found out this morning that 2 victims of a terrorist shooting attack in Tel Aviv were named Tomer Morad and Eitam Magini. They were friends, both aged 27. They were sitting at the Ilka bar on Dizengoff Street last night when a Palestinian terrorist opened fire in the midst of the bar. Terrorist was also just a year older than them, 28-year-old resident of Jenin. He was shot later that evening by security forces. And then just a few moments before services, it was announced that there's a 3rd victim, fatality from the shooting. Israeli Barak Lufan, who's 35, father of 3, is a Paralympics and Olympic kayaking team coach. The Prime Minister of Israel, Naftali Bennett, I think accurately stated, all of Israel shares this grief, which is to say, this is not only felt by the immediate circles of these families, but by the entirety of a country. I've had the unfortunate privilege of being with Israeli friends and colleagues when an attack like this takes place. And while we can sit on one side of the world and offer condolences and feel the tragedy of the moment, it's easy to see when you're with Israelis sitting in America while something like this happens in Israel that we have very different experiences. There's a rush of attention to check in on everyone you know, a rush filled with fear, and so they start calling their friends. And as was reported in the Times of Israel article, something that struck me as something I've watched happen, when your friends don't answer after 2 hours, and you knew they were in that area, you know that they were a casualty. And so there's this immense fear from this having happened time and time and time again, and Israel being a small country, and people knowing that if your friend said, I'm going to Dizengoff Street, that there are only so many bars that they might be in, and that if they don't answer their cell phone, that you already know what the news is. Second, there's a sense which surprised me, a sense of guilt and failure. The Israeli Defense Force is well aware of the threat of a terrorist. Israel has one of the strongest intelligence agencies in the world, and as we all know, extensive security measures at every border with walls and fences and cameras, checkpoints. And so the second thing I've noticed in friends who watch something happen in their country is that there's a feeling that someone or something in this very well-developed, intense, expensive, perfected system, something broke. Someone didn't do their job. Some system didn't do what it was supposed to do, because it's not surprising that someone would try to attack a bar in Tel Aviv. We know that's going to happen. So why didn't we stop this one? Some of the blame falls on us. We need to find out who made a mistake. And third, there are emotions that don't go away in the days or weeks that follow. There are emotions that seem to get planted and stay perhaps eternally with people once they've experienced something like this. That something is what we often call trauma. We know it from our own experience. Jewishly, we can think back a few months ago to Colleyville. Perhaps you've had your own experience with trauma, as many of us have. Abuse, loss, often grief is described personally as a traumatic event that other people see, but they don't truly understand because it's not their trauma. One of the tricky things about trauma is that it doesn't just exist in a moment. It lasts far longer than we would ever imagine it could. Rabbi Paul Kipnis serves a congregation in Calabasas, and some of you may remember this as I mentioned it in the moments when it happened. But he wrote extensively about the 11-day period that began with the attack on the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh. His synagogue, like ours, watched very closely, as I think it's fair to say most of the country and certainly all Jews did, when the mass shooting happened at the Tree of Life and 11 people lost their lives. But for his congregation, 10 days later, in their neighborhood, there was another mass shooting at a local bar, and one of his own college students was in the bar while the shooting happened. And then the next day, there was a huge forest fire in their neighborhood. 75% of the congregation was expelled from their homes, and the fire came within 30 feet of the synagogue. 3 massive events in 11 days. So what does Paul write, reflecting back on this years later? He said, here's just one example of what trauma feels like. After going through that in the moment, months later, a friend of his who's a social worker asked me, "How are things with your family?" And I confessed, my wife and I just had an argument, which became something much bigger than the issue deserved. We had to figure out this issue, but in no way did it require the intensity I brought to it. That intensity stemmed from the trauma that started in those 11 days. And so if we know that, then we know that these 3 weeks of terror attacks in Israel are not going to end next week. That 3 months from now, somebody's going to be having an argument with their wife, and they're not going to be able to keep their emotions in check. That what happened this week is going to last for months or years, as it does in our own lives. But I want to shift to our holiday coming up in 1 week. Sometimes we look at our holidays and our sacred text and we say, well, these people don't really know what they're talking about when it comes to modern issues of trauma or psychology. And sometimes we can be really smart to take the other tack and say, what if the people who put together our Haggadah, these rabbis who had no college education, who knew nothing of Freud, what if they were brilliant in their own way? So let's take the second path. Most Haggadot and most of our Passover Seders, as we will be reminded next week, we get to the middle of the Seder, a little bit before the food, we dip our finger into the wine and we take 10 drops of wine out and we mention each of the plagues. And then most of us, which is exactly what's in most of the Haggadot that we use, immediately after dipping our finger 10 times, we start to sing Dayenu. That it would have been enough. And we love singing Dayenu. And we wipe off our hands and we're getting closer and closer to the meal. But in a traditional Haggadah, there's a passage often skipped. You finish dipping your finger 10 times and saying the plagues, and you're supposed to read the following. If the Egyptians suffered 10 plagues by God's finger, they suffered 50 by God's hand at the sea. Rabbi Akiva multiplies even further. He says each plague was really 5 plagues. So in Egypt, they suffered 50 plagues. And by the sea, they suffered 250 plagues. This is what it sounds like to understand trauma. 1 traumatic event is really 5. 10 plagues is really 50. 50 lost lives is really 250 terrible events happening over and over again. And the Haggadah that my family uses, that I think I'm the only one in my family who likes, but so far nobody's left the table. It imagines what these added plagues were. It says the following. The Egyptians who survived the plagues could not escape the plague of their memories. Their nostrils had sniffed the air of fiery hailstones falling from the sky, and their noses still burned. And their bodies moved slowly because during the plague of darkness, they couldn't see where to walk, and so they never stopped walking slowly. The plague continued. And then there was the plague of grieving the ones that they had lost, the firstborn. And then there was the plague of doubt for what they could have done differently but didn't. And then there was the plague of shame for what happened. And then there was the plague of helplessness because they couldn't save themselves. So 3 young Israelis sat in a bar this week. They were 27 and 35 respectively, and they arrived early to meet other friends. We can be sorry and saddened, but we have to recognize that our friends across the ocean are likely feeling the pain of a plague, the multiplication of trauma that won't end with the next news cycle, the rippling effects that will come for months, fights with spouses, grief revisited of previous losses, fear perhaps to go get a beer. And maybe, as we've seen in our own selves, vengeance for the enemy and anyone associated with them. In trauma, plagues are multiplied. One thing we can do is recognize that that is the case. Acknowledge it when it happens, which is why at Passover next week, we will mark 10 plagues on our plate to mark each single one. And then we won't read the passage probably that I just mentioned, but maybe we'll think about it for a second and say these 10 marks on my plate, it was really 250. And then we'll turn to Dayenu. And we'll introduce Dayenu with a rhetorical mathematical question, except we usually skip this part too. So let me share it with you. The Haggadah traditionally has an introduction to Dayenu before we start singing. It's the following words. Ironically, if you know modern Hebrew, it's mathematical words. Kama ma'alot tovot lemakom aleinu. How many degrees of goodness has God bestowed upon us? Ilu hotzianu. We begin to sing. It asks us to count how many good things came out of that one event. If we were just brought out of Egypt, Dayenu, that one would have been enough. Ilu natan lanu, if we were just given Shabbat, if we were just given the Torah, that would have been enough. If the plagues are mathematical multiplication, one plague becomes 250. Dayenu is division. It says that the one moment, the exodus of freedom, is actually millions of moments. We weren't just freed from slavery, we were given Shabbat and Torah and holidays, song and dance and prayer and peoplehood. Dayenu says, don't look at one great moment as one at all. Divide it into all of the little pieces that are good to have. Dayenu says our cup overflows. And so in the closing remarks of his reflection, Rabbi Kipnis, who had those terrible 11 days and the many months and years that followed, he shares the Jewish prayer for surviving something scary. With a little adaptation, it reads as follows. Blessed are you, eternal our God, guide of the universe, who nurtures among those of us plagued a sense of goodness within us, and who, through blessedly caring souls, continues to remind me of my goodness within. There may not be a way, or at least an easy way, to erase the lasting effects that we've experienced that traumatize us in some way. The nature of trauma is that it multiplies. But Dayenu reminds us that every single blessing we've received is filled with countless other blessings. I pray that as we enter into Passover, as we count plagues, that we also count all the blessings we have. Let's acknowledge the trauma that others are facing in these moments, especially that our friends in Israel are feeling this week, as they felt last week and the week before. And then together, all celebrate Passover around our respective tables everywhere in the world and say, Dayenu, let's now count our blessings, and let's divide them and count every little piece so that our children hear all the ways in which we are blessed and remind ourselves how lucky we are. Shabbat Shalom and an early Hag Pesach Sameach. Turn now to our Torah. Turn to page 250 as we rise and take our Torah from the Ark.
Ki mitzion tetzei Torah, Ki mitzion tetzei Torah, U'devar Adonai miRushalayim, Baruch Shenatan Torah, Torah, Baruch Shenatan Torah, Torah, Le'amo Yisrael, Mikedushato, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh Shemo, Gadol Adonai Iti, Oneramama, Shemo Yakdav, Lecha Adonai Hagedula, Hagevura, Hatiferet, Hanitzach, Hahun, Ki kol bashamayim uvaretz, Ki kol bashamayim uvaretz, Lecha Adonai hamamlacha, v'hamit naseh lechol erush.
Please be seated. We're reading Leviticus 14, verses 1 through 5, which I know you know exactly what that means. This is that section which we're in, which normally, we've been saying this the last few weeks in Torah study, often we find this to be the most irrelevant section of the Torah that we never want to read because it's all about leprosy and skin disease and the way in which things are contagious and how you want to quarantine someone outside of the camp so nobody else gets sick, except for these last 2 years. It's perfect. Yet again, it seems as though the authors of our texts maybe weren't as archaic as we thought. They knew exactly what we were going to experience. And so this week, we read about what's to happen when your COVID test is positive, and what the priest is supposed to tell you to do, and how many days you're supposed to stay outside the camp, and when you get to come back in and be a part of the community again. So we'll start. It's chapter 14, the first 5 verses.
Please join me in the prayer on page 250. Baruch hu et Adonai hamborach. Baruch Adonai hamborach leolam va'ed. Baruch ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch ata Adonai noten ha'torah. Vayidaber Adonai el Moshe lemor zo tehiyeh Torah hamitzorah vayom tehorato vahuva el hakohen v'tziva hakohen el michutz lamachaneh v'ra'ah hakohen v'hineh nirpa nega hatzarat min hatzarua v'tziva hakohen v'lakach lamitaher shetei tziforim hayot tahorot ve'et erez ushni tahalot be'ezov v'tziva hakohen v'shachat et hatzipor ha'achat el kli keheres al mayim hayim. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai, noten haTorah.
God spoke to Moses and said, "This is the ritual for the leper at the time that he is to be cleansed. When it's reported to the priest shall go outside the camp, and if he sees the leper has been healed of his illness, the priest shall order 2 live clean birds, cedar wood, crimson stuff, and hyssop to be brought to him who is to be cleansed, and shall order one of the birds to be sacrificed over fresh water in an earthen vessel." So if you've done that, you can raise your hand. These are all those who, we're all glad you're healed. So there were some things that were a little different back then, but what hasn't changed is there was a sense that those who became ill, we wanted to care for them, but also care for the greater community. And so with that in mind, we turn our thoughts now towards not the community's health, but rather those individuals who are suffering, those who are in need of healing, as we offer the words of Misha Berach, our prayer for those loved ones to find their full sense of themselves, of mind, body, or spirit, as we will invite you to share their names in the midst of our prayer.
Misha Berach Avotenu Mekor HaBracha Leimotenu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say Amen.
If there's a name you'd like to share, please share it.
Reed Wasserstrom. Misha Berach Imotenu Mekor HaBracha Le'avotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shalema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say Amen.
Please rise as we return the Torah to the Ark.
V'zot haTorah asher sa Moshe lifnei bnei Yisrael, al pi Adonai b'yad Moshe. Yad elai, elai, yad elai, elai, elai. Yad elai, 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 elai. Yad elai, elai, yad elai, elai. Etz Chaim hi machzikim ba v'tomechleha me'ushar v'chol netivotav shalom hashivenu Ilecha v'nashua Chadesh, Chadesh Yameinu
282.
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתגדו לה לייצב ראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי ארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמעו ושמעו אחד.
Please be seated. There are stars up above, so far away, we only see their light. Long, long after the star itself has left. And so it is with people that we've loved. Their memories continue to shine ever brightly in our lives, even though their time with us is done. But we are reminded that the stars that light up the darkest night, those are the stars we use to guide us. And so we pledge that as we live our days, that we will continue to remember those people who have been such a light for us, as we make this the way that we remember. We remember in our community those that we've recently lost in these last days: Dr. Barry Greenberg, Stanley Brandt, and Gloria Katz. We add to their names those that the Jewish community, as one community, is remembering this week, who lost their lives in the attack yesterday: Eitam Magini, Tomer Morad, and Barak Lufan. And so, too, we recall those that we lost at this season in years past: John Jonas Amper, Stanley Bober, Erwin Cohen, Gene Cooper, Cantor Gedalia Gertz, Ethel Greenwald, Ann Harris, Betsy K. Hillelson, Harold Horvitz, Emmanuel R. Israf, Samuel Kalish, Julian Cook, Sam Marks, Yenta Profis, Sophia Reichenstein, Albert Rose, Arthur Ross, Hermine Klein Salpeter, Dora Steenberg, Isabel Sugarman, Louis Vigdor, Jacob P. Whitelaw, Joseph Weiner, Edith Wiskind, Tyrone Danielin Yedidzion, and Sam Zabel. If there are names I mispronounced or names you'd like to share, please do so. We rise, page 294, as we honor our loved ones with the words of Mourner's Kaddish. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shmei rabbah, b'alma divrach hirutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon uv'yomechon uv'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, b'agala uv'izman kariv v'imru, amen. Yehei shmei rabbah mevarach le'olam olmei olmaya, yitbarak v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitalal, shmei dekudasha barichu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbachata v'nechamata, da'amiran bi'alma v'imru, amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru, amen. Osei shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru, amen. May the one who creates harmony on high bring peace to us, to all Israel, and to all the world, as we say, amen. Having connected with those that we love and lost, we connect with each other as we bless each other with the words of the priests. May God bless you and keep you. May God's light shine upon you and be gracious unto you.
v'sam lecha shalom.
May you feel God's presence within you always, and may you find peace.
Amen.
Please remain standing as we'll invite the Olenek family up once again for part 2. Now you get to do part 2. The kids are still cooking. Yeah. Right. They still get to eat it. They just don't get to say the blessing.
Short one or the long one?
You read what's on the back of that page.
Oh, okay. The heaven and the earth were finished, and all their array. On the seventh day, God finished the work that God had been doing, and God ceased on the seventh day from all the work that God had done. And God blessed the seventh day and declared it holy, because on it God ceased from all the work of creation that God had done. See? I asked.
Ask and you shall
appear.
receive. That's right.
Who wants to do the prayer over the wine? You want to do it? You want to do it with me? Fine. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu v'shabbat kodesho b'yahava uvraton hinchilanu zikaron lemasi v'reishit ki hu yom techila lamikrae kodesh zecher letziat mitzrayim ki vanu v'charta v'otanu kidashta mikol ha'adin v'shabbat kodshecha v'ahava uvratzon inchaltanu Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh haShabbat.
You want to uncover the challah and you can hold it up. It's hiding under there.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen.
Thank you all. You can return to your seats. We can all be seated for a few announcements from our co-president, Andrew Meerman.
My house, you couldn't eat. You couldn't talk today.
It's for everybody at home, online, and everybody here tonight. Shabbat Shalom. So we have a bunch of announcements to go through. On April 15th, does everybody know what day that is? Mark? Not that day, Mark Boper. So happy, on behalf of the Board of Trustees, my co-president, Elaine Newman, would wish everybody a happy Passover, and hope everybody gets to enjoy, maybe for the first time in 3 years, to be together with their families, so wishing everybody the best. But with that in mind, there will be no Shabbat services in person, it'll just be online. So I want everybody at home and everybody here to remember that. So the doors will be locked. Please join Rabbi Brown and Cantor Kathy Fromson at Passover service on April the 16th at 10 a.m. Details will follow. I imagine that is weather related. That's not on the sheet, so I can't. It's in my phone. I can pull it out. The nature realm. The nature realm. It's in my calendar, but yes. So please put that down. April 25th for Monday night, April 25th. Please mention Temple Israel when you go to Dewey's to pick up your pizza. You can eat online. You can order online. You can eat in place, and about 20% of the proceeds will go support the religious school. So please go to Dewey's Pizza on Monday the 25th. The Community Shabbat, first time in a long time, April 29th at 7 p.m. here. There's going to be a monitor, Brian Rolnick Fox will lead a dialogue with the keynote speaker, Bel Yoli, and the subject is basically how to define anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism, and anti-Israel in America today, which happened to be a conversation in our household, ironically, last night. So it's a big topic, and hopefully everybody can join us for that, April the 29th at 7 p.m. here at Temple Israel. Join the Hunger Walk May the 1st, and please check out the details in your weekly emails. And finally, Save the date for the weekend of June the 24th and the 25th. We have a big event that weekend, the Mishkan, which is also known as our outdoor sanctuary out that way. So if you haven't seen it, please check it out. There's going to be a special service on Friday night and a beautiful, wonderful, we haven't done this in a long time, fundraiser in person on that Saturday night. So please look out for details. I'm sure there's be an invitation sent, emails sent, and all the other stuff. So it'll be very exciting. I'm sorry?
Poster is in the lobby.
Please check out the poster in the lobby. Is it the rendering? No. Oh, it's just, okay. The invitation's in the lobby, so you get a big size. Take a picture of it with your phone so you don't forget. Shabbat Shalom. Great to see everybody.
We thank Eli again as we'll close our service with the words of Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu, and we hope everybody has a wonderful, wonderful Passover and a wonderful Seder with whoever you're celebrating with, and we will see you on the other side of Pesach. So please join with us, Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu.
And join us for the oneg and the social hall afterwards.
And the oneg right now in the social.
Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu, Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu, Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu ve'akulam. Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu, Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu, Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu ve'akulam. Salam Aleinu ve'akol ha'olam. Salam, salam, salam Aleinu ve'akol ha'olam. Salam, salam. Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu, Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu, Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu ve'akulam. Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu, Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu, Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu ve'akulam. Shabbat Shalom.